So if you're trying to get the job in programming as a programmer, you probably at least come across once to a site like Leetcode or HackerRank. Especially the Leetcode is notoriously famous among somebody like students, college students, or professional who are trying to get their job from FANG like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, or with Google, or even Microsoft. So the site like this is definitely helpful you to get prepared for. Of course, that's solving algorithm puzzles, or one of the most important skill set that is companies looking to hire when they come to the programming jobs. So if you've ever seen a site like this, I only solved the easy one. You probably get used to knowing how important this is. Of course, there are always two types of interview questions. One is behavior, and that goes apply for all jobs out there, whether you want to get a sales job or coding jobs or IT jobs or business jobs or whatever. But then the other side of the spectrum, more about the skill set, you do need to know how to solve algorithm puzzles. Of course, for more experienced professionals, that's not always the case. Like they are looking for other multiple technology stack and architecture design and other things are also equally or even more important. But as especially you're a college student who want to get a job in that, for example, Google, you probably at least know how important this is. So if you've seen this before, great. But let's just kind of see how the format looks like. So once you log in or create an account and log in, you can explore, but the main area, main section that where you want to spend most time on is the problem section. It's sorted by different type of programming puzzles, and then it shows acceptance rate and then difficulty level. I solved a few easy problems, but let's just take a look at one of the problems that probably is one of the easiest one to solve. So if you look at this one, you will see that what is it in the left side, you'll see that the problem statement, like with some input and output givens. And then on the right side, this is a where area, actual working area, where you can actually, choose the programming language you're familiar with. In my case, I chose a Java previously. And then also, and then you can learn it, and then submit to get it accepted, right? So this is kind of format. And then, of course, this is what you need before working on anything else is something called pseudocode. So let's talk about the pseudocode a bit. And the problem we're going to try to solve is actually not this one. We're trying to solve the problem. In this time, we're solving one easy problem called, let's see where it is, which is a good problem. So we're trying to solve this valid parenthesis. So let's go and dive into that. So here is the problem that we're going to solve today, called the valid parenthesis. So the problem statement again is on the left side, left panel. Given a string as containing just characters, this opening bracket, closing bracket, opening curly brace, closing curly brace, and opening square bracket, and then closing bracket. Determine if the input string is valid. And there's a condition like input string is valid if open bracket must be closed by same type of bracket, open bracket must be closed in the correct order, every closed bracket has a corresponding open bracket of same type. And there's some example here, and then there's some constraint. In this case, it doesn't have any other characters, and then the length size is restricted to up to 10,000. And there's some sample cases because I tested before and then it was coming out valid. So the first thing you want to do is that you want to understand the statement, but also at the same time, there should be a language that you're familiar with. So in my case, it's Java, but sometimes I want to try in the Golang. That's the language I'm learning. So, but it's sure the language that you're most familiar with. If you ever took computer science course, of course, different language have different type of styles and then tool set. You should know at least two things. You should know different algorithm and then also data structure. Data structure for the programming languages are typically different from like language to language. For example, with Java, which I've been spending most time coding with, has things like array as the simplest type of data structure and the list. And then there are like utility through the util function or the library. There are things like a list, array list, map, hash map, stacks, hash map, and then there's furthermore, right? Queue and much more, and the trees and etc. So there are so many things that can be named. Now, but using that algorithm data structure, you have to kind of understand how to solve the problem, because in this case, I think depending on what kind of problem you're trying to solve, some data structure fit better than other. Of course, whenever we talk about optimization or optimal, there is things like how to optimize using the space-time or the time of the complexity of time or the complexity of space. Those are a little more, as you get into the programming, you probably heard about it, but those are like how to measure the efficiency of the program you created, or there's a problems, solution, right? So after understanding that, I think the first thing is that imagine that you're coming to the coding interview, like actual on-site coding interview, working virtual, but it's in person. You're given with about 1 hour or less per like problem statement, right? And sometimes this is the easy one. Sometimes it's more complicated than this. So first thing is you have to know what you know. And of course, if you ever study computer science, you should at least get familiar with, seeing something like this. Because in things like a regular expression, this type of problem is quite common, right? But before doing anything else, you have to know the problem itself. And then in person, like an interview, usually have 45 minutes or even an hour. But typically, you're supposed to come up with the solution in about 30 minutes, because you have to kind of talk and then ask an additional question or trying to improve it. So you don't have a lot of time. So solving a problem like this a lot, and also keep training yourself, definitely helps to be prepared for your next job. So looking at this problem, let's just see that what does this one is trying to do. So given a string s contains such character, and then there is a different type of characters, opening and then closing type, and then you have to determine if the string is valid. So for a problem like this, if you ever work in a problem like this, you will immediately know that other than maybe that typically you would think of a list that might be needed, but you want to kind of see that which one is opening and closing, and based on it, you want to check if they match each other, right? And then looking at some example problem like this, you have to think about boundary cases. So if you see that opening brace, and then you have to think about what to do, and when you see the closing brace, you have to think of what to do. In this case, is output is valid, so it's true. But in the second problem, as you see here, is it's mix of different opening, closing bracket or braces. You see that it's opening parenthesis and then closing parenthesis and then so forth, and this is also true. But the last one is a false, because you see that you start with the opening bracket but closing with the square bracket, and this is not the only combination. So you have to think about additional boundary cases that might possibly you have to test for, right? So how to solve this? Make sure that you understand the problem first, but before jumping to coding, one of the things is that once you start to understand, I think you have to kind of jot down with the pencil and paper, and then create something called maybe try to understand the situation first by kind of drawing it out, right? Try different cases like this, if you don't even think about writing the code. You have to think about, what if this? What if that, right? So let's try to do that, right, first. And then we have to create a pseudocode, okay? So let's go from there. We will start with the pseudocode. So we are going to take a look at that problem we seen earlier, valid parenthesis. We'll start with a very simple case because we have to understand the problem first before jumping into coding, and before that, there's one more intermediate step. But let's look at the simplest case possible, where we see the opening parenthesis and then closing parenthesis. In this case, is true. Okay, so at this point you might think about how would I calculate logic. If I seen this opening and then next when I see this is gonna be then true. But what about other simple case like opening parenthesis but then closing with the bracket? In this case, a false, right? And then you might list out problem like this over and over again, like trying to think about all the possibility, right? They might lead it to true, they might lead it to the false statement, right? Or technically anything else like is going to be false, right? Even problem like this, you can see that this is actually going to be quite a lot, right? So you might think that at this point, what are the best ways to detect this, like a pattern, for example. And then so you could think about, okay, so I could do it by putting this into some kind of like a list, right? So I can see that if does it come here, and the next one is if I see this, if I see this opening parenthesis, then it should be closing parenthesis, then next one should be to return true, right? Something like this, right? So this, even like something simple as this, is called the pseudocode. So pseudocode is not exactly the code statement, but it can be like written like command or logical statement. So that actually kind of helps to form the coding later, right? They can help to form to put inside the code, right? The logic later. So because this, if you create a statement like this, logical statement, technically can be helped to transform into the code statement, right? So let's take a look at this one again. If I see that opening parenthesis, next one should be that's one to return the true. It's not always true at the later edge case scenario, but in this case is the valid, right? This simple cases. And then well, similarly, if I see then next one should be to return true, right? And if I see that, next one should return true, right? And then maybe false otherwise, right? Otherwise. Of course, then this is not always true because we're only looking at the case like this. What about we see a more complicated like this? So if I see that, and then I'm going to see this, and then maybe that. This is also true. So if I apply this here, if I see opening parenthesis, and then the next one should be that to return true, otherwise false. But this is not necessarily true. If you think about it, I should still think about how to kind of process this opening square bracket, right? To actually store that somehow, and then process next to closing symbols, right? Similarly, I could think about this one is also true, right? So like this one no longer kind of work. It might be similar, but it doesn't no longer work, right? So you could think about some other like more tricky scenario, like what about like that? This should be false, right? So you should think about all these edge cases and the one that actually passed, right? And you have to kind of list it out, make sure they understand. So somehow you have to change it from here to something else. So like instead of doing this, if I see this example, if I see this and then next one doesn't have to be this to return true, but one thing I can tell is, like as I've done before, you have to kind of separate it by opening and closing. So for example, this is that, and this is the opening, and then that, and then this, and then this are closing, right? So you have to kind of separate by two category. So like if I see this, so technically it could be converted into something like if I see that, or that, or this, right? Then somehow store it, and then, or if I see this, or this, or that, then somehow match, or something like that, right? So because I think that ideally what in this particular problem, we have to kind of compare like a problem that are like matching each other, right? In order, certain priority order, right? So you have to kind of think about this as common form of the pseudocode first, right? So and then like you have to know that you have to kind of try this exercise quite a while to figure out before jumping into coding, right? So in my case, then once you have understood that and write the code somehow, you have to kind of think about like how would you be like, doing, solving more complicated cases. So like there are different type of data structure in the like different languages, of course, but usually that you have to know which one you want to use. There's things like a list and array, and then things like linked list, which is had like where you can like is a kind of can call each other by next, and then kind of go in by kind of like a list, right? And then there's things like stack, and there is a map, and then there are queue, etc., and tree, right? There are many more, right? So you have to think about where, not necessarily one, but you have to think of to solve this problem, what is the right data structure to use, right? And which one will you use, which one will fit, right? So if you look at the problem that I seen show you earlier, and then which is kind of look like this, and I'm going to just go group this together. So I can tell in this particular problem is we want to use a stack, right? And I will kind of tell you why. So what happened is that if I have like structure, if a string looks like this, right? We want to kind of store in an order that goes one, and then goes that, and that, and that, right? And then what happened is that whenever you see certain character, you want to pop it up, and the pop up, and then match against the what is next one, right? So you want to pop it up and match against next one, and then match against that, and then so forth, right? That's kind of logic you want to go with, right? So if it is that that's like seeing the closing bracket, you have to do certain action with the next one, right? And then and then go forward, right? So you have to kind of think about this logical statement. Simple. Let's say I will just give a simple example. Let's say you have I'm doing with this. So what happened is if I store that, right, and the next one is that. So I stored this, so I push it into the stack. Then next one, I see this. I want to kind of compare this against the one I pushed earlier, and if it doesn't match, then I want to pop up this too, and then stack is clear. So and then if the stack is empty, then it will be totally return true, right? So that's kind of like you have to think about this logical step. So my example, how I created for the Java, looking something like this. Let me give you like an example how I solve this. So here's my solution created using Java. And then I'm using 3 type of data structure. Technically it's a 2 because the map and hashmap are kind of same. I'm using map as only like generic type for this. And the stack is the first in, first out. So in the like a solution here, I'm using this to check against or create the somewhere to store and recognize the closing symbols, right? And the match against opening symbol. And then this gonna be the length of the string. For example, if it's gonna be like that, this is length is gonna be 4, right? and the counter is kind of going through the string. And then this is probably most important. If this is empty at the end, it's going to be turned true, because, and then otherwise for or false, right? So this is going to be the one that actually we're going to check against, right? And I'm going through the loop, and then I'm going to kind of iterate through each substring. In this case, gonna be like, if this example, again, same example like that, the substring of 0, 1 is gonna be that, right, etc, etc. Then what happened is that if it's opening symbol, I'm going to push into stack. Otherwise, I'm going to pop it up and then take an actions to kind of do the calculation. And at the end, if it's empty, it will return true, and they will otherwise return false. So let's try to learn that, right? So I kind of copied my solution. I'm going to paste here, and then I'm going to run it. And then you can see the test case. All the basic test cases were successful, but I have to submit it to make sure that it actually passed overall. And you can see it passed everything, right? Of course, this is not the most optimal solution. You can see that it's a bit 54% user and 20% user with the Java. So I kind of overuse the memory, right? There may be better solution, and then you can of course do other things, and then there's additional solutions, discussion section, etc. So at this point, you if it's like a real interview, you would think that you're not having enough time to kind of find the most optimal solution first try, right? What you want to do instead is you want to walk through what is the further way to optimize. So for user analysis, there is a different way to do it. You can think about, okay, how I will improve this code further, right? Would I use, for example, instead of using the map or stack, I could use it with maybe just one data structure. I could use recursion instead. So there may be further way to optimize it. Of course, the easiest way to kind of do the analysis is doing something called big O, right? So in this case, the big O for the time is going to be O n, right? Because I'm using the one iteration, right? But the space complexity is quite complex, right? Big O for space, because I'm using stack. I'm using this, so I'm using a multiple data structure to data structure, right? So it's going to be also O when. So you want to kind of talk about it, and you want to look at from that angle when it discuss how to improve this further, right? And then there may be opportunity that maybe there's redundant step, so you want to talk about it. And so kind of usually around the 30 minutes or so, you should be able to come with your first solution. And then while you are solving the problem, you should kind of explain it. Why you chose this, and then what about that? Of course, before jumping into the code, you should try to kind of, talk with your interviewer, talking about, why is all the given condition, make sure that all the, edge cases are correct, boundary cases, and etc. Make sure they understand all the requirement first, and then come with some pseudocode, and then solve the problem with 20 minutes or so. Because next 10 to 15 minutes, you spend the time talking about how to optimize, right? Because assuming that most interviews are around 45 minutes, you should have all the discussion and understand the problem with the 30 minutes or so, and then later 10 to 15 minutes, you should spend the time to talk about your overall solution. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I chose a really simple example, but there might be further ways to to usually for most FANG or the more top intro questions are around the medium or even hard range. So definitely you guys kind of want to go through that, maybe jumping into medium first, right? But if you're kind of new to this, I would recommend you to start with easy, and then after you solve some problem there, and then start doing the medium examples, right? So yeah, that's it, and hopefully you find this session useful, and then see you next time.